Welcome to my channel. Welcome my family. This is USA Fact Story, where mysteries become reality.
India is currently executing one of the largest infrastructure build-outs in human history. To construct the thousands of bridges, highways, and ports spanning the subcontinent, the country requires a staggering volume of physical material. Supplying the steel skeleton for this nationwide expansion is the JSW Group. The origins of this modern conglomerate trace back to the 1950s. A first-generation industrialist named O.P. Jindal opened a small pipe-bending workshop in Hisar, Haryana. At a time when India relied heavily on imported industrial goods, Jindal prioritized domestic manufacturing, a vision of self-reliance recognized years later when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh released his official biography. That ambition eventually materialized into the JSW Vijayanagar megaplant. Situated near the ancient empire of Vijayanagar at Hampi, the surrounding landscape is famously rocky and barren. By planting over 1.6 million trees and engineering massive water recovery systems, JSW converted this remote iron ore belt into a green industrial oasis. The sheer imposing scale of the facility is dictated by the complexity of the steelmaking process. Raw iron ore arrives directly from local mines and undergoes a physical and chemical filtration process called beneficiation. This strips away impurities, reducellets. Those pellets are fed into a blast furnace alongside coke and lime and heated to over 1200 degrees Celsius. To generate this immense heat with less environmental impact, the plant utilizes Corex technology. This greener production method consumes less water and produces a combustible gas that is captured and reused as fuel to melt the iron. The resulting molten iron contains high levels of carbon and sulfur, which make the metal brittle. To fix this, the high mel undergoes desulfurization, and high-pressure oxygen is blasted through it to burn off the excess carbon. The purified liquid steel is then passed through horizontal and vertical rollers, casting it into the exact dimensions of JSW's flagship NeoSteel TMT bars. By directly controlling the mines, the beneficiation, filtration, the thermal processing, and the final casting, JSW engineered a highly efficient vertical integration machine. They established absolute authority over every physical step required to turn raw earth into finished steel. O.P. Jindal's son, Sajjan Jindal, inherited this vertically integrated machine. Known in the industry as the Man of Steel, he recognized that the logic of total supply chain control could be expanded outward to capture even more value from the broader Indian economy. Steel manufacturing requires enormous amounts of electricity and heavy logistics. Rather than paying outside vendors, Sajjan Jindal expanded horizontally. He built JSW Energy to power the plants and JSW Infrastructure, creating the second-largest private port network in India to handle the massive shipments of raw materials and finished goods. This created a closed-loop corporate ecosystem. The waste produced by one division becomes the raw material for the next. For example, the highly polluting steel slag left over from the blast furnaces is captured and sent directly to JSW Cement to produce low-carbon building materials. Internalizing all of these operational costs allowed the conglomerate to grow at a staggering rate. Today, the JSW Group commands a market capitalization of over 3.13 lakh crore rupees, making it a $23 billion industrial powerhouse. But if we look closely at this balance scale diagram, we can see how they fund that growth. To build a target production capacity of 37 million tons per year, JSW absorbed a massive amount of leverage. The company's balance sheet now carries 65,495 crore in debt. Financial analysts tracking this leverage have flagged several vulnerabilities. According to recent market data, the company demonstrates poor asset efficiency, meaning it struggles to generate sufficient revenue relative to the massive size of its holdings, leaving the stock trading at a highly expensive valuation premium. To justify this valuation and outrun the debt, organic growth was no longer fast enough. Sajjan Jindal pivoted the company toward aggressive, high-stakes acquisitions, targeting bankrupt competitors being auctioned off under India's Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The company had successfully scaled its physical mastery of steel into a sprawling horizontal corporate empire. But in doing so, it tied its survival to a delicate high-wire act of compounding leverage and risky distressed asset buyouts. This acquisition strategy peaked in 2021. JSW placed a massive 19,700 crore rupee bid to take over the bankrupt Bhushan Power and Steel Limited. Bhushan Power was generating roughly 11% of JSW's projected earnings. Securing these facilities was the central strategic requirement for the company to hit its aggressive 10 million ton production goal for 2030. Then, the legal system intervened. In a shocking move, the Supreme Court of India stepped in and completely invalidated the multi-billion-dollar acquisition, freezing JSW's growth strategy in its tracks. The court's ruling highlighted severe procedural irregularities during the insolvency process. The judges determined that both the appointed resolution professional and the committee of creditors failed to fulfill their statutory obligations. This flowchart outlines the specific financial violation. The court found JSW failed to make the required upfront equity infusion mandated by the Insolvency Code. Instead, funds were routed through compulsory convertible debentures, a backdoor financial instrument that bypassed legal requirements. The market reaction was immediate and punishing. JSW's stock price dropped nearly 5.5% in a single trading session, wiping out thousands of crores in market capitalization and instantly erasing 10 to 15% of their projected future production capacity. JSW proved they could dominate the physical realities of supply chains, logistics, and heavy manufacturing. However, this collision with the Supreme Court shows that even an aggressive growth engine stalls against the rigid procedural compliance of India's insolvency laws. The fallout extends far beyond JSW's balance sheet. The Supreme Court's decision created massive collateral damage, exposing deep vulnerabilities within the Indian banking sector. Lenders who had already accepted the settlement are experiencing financial whiplash. Banks are now under court orders to return over 19,000 crore rupees to JSW, forcing them to quickly scramble and make fresh capital provisions. This single ruling injects immense systemic uncertainty into India's entire insolvency and bankruptcy code. The framework was originally designed to provide predictable, time-bound outcomes for distressed assets. Now, investors face a new market reality. With the constant threat of post-deal judicial intervention, financial institutions will demand higher risk premiums for taking on distressed corporate debt, leading to much slower resolution timelines. O.P. Jindal's original vision relied on mastering the physical elements, bending iron, moving earth, and controlling the heat of the blast furnace. But a $23 billion empire built on debt and acquisitions must ultimately survive.